a lot of people have asked me if when I was healing from anxiety, panic, and OCD, if it was gradual or if I had one insight and then everything changed. And it was more like I had insight after insight and then gradually my life changed. And I did notice kind of bigger changes early on as well. But I wanted to share a more full story of what that looked like. So I had always felt like an anxious person from the time I was a child. But my anxiety really changed and went to a new level in 2011. As I'm recording this, it is January 2024. I haven't really said 2024. I really struggled after having a panic attack in 2011. And then I ramped up everything I was doing for my mental health, which innocently overcomplicated it. So from 2011 to 2018, I really struggled. I had a panic attack and it involved derealization and depersonalization. And I'd already been a school psychologist at this time. I'd already been in and out of therapy for a decade or more. Like, I loved self-help. I loved spiritual stuff and routines. And I don't want to make this story longer than it needs to be. But by 2018, I had been doing a lot. I thought you needed to do a lot for your mental health, and especially so your mental health didn't get worse. And so at that time, I had not only tried, but really done it for a long time, trying to have a perfect sleep routine, really caring about sleep hygiene. So I had a long nighttime routine, and I'd, unplug all the electronics, never be near my phone. I would meditate. I would rub magnesium on my body. I would it was so long. I also had a longer morning routine to make sure I was eating a proper breakfast. And I'd pretty much stopped doing any sort of high intensity exercise at all. I primarily did yoga therapy in the morning or sometimes a slow exercise. And I would meditate. So I'd have time to really be slow in the morning, meditating, listening to helpful stuff. There was a long time when I was trying to rewire my brain, doing Joe Dispenza stuff. I had an altar and I would use essential oils and do yoga therapy, and it was a lot. And then I had also became certified to teach meditation and mindfulness in schools. I was a school psychologist, and I also loved it. All that sounded so great. And I think meditation and mindfulness, I have nothing against them. I just did it as I'm broken, you have to fix me. And also it was that, but it was and this could get worse, because the derealization and depersonalization, I didn't know that's what it was called. It felt like a predecessor to losing my mind. I also was having a lot of intrusive thoughts. So I just thought there was so much I needed to do, and it was going to take a lot of hard work to feel better. And I don't even know if that was possible. So, and I had severe driving anxiety, and that's where I'd experienced my panic attacks a lot. And I don't want to go make this longer than it needs to be. But I would find things that would work. Cognitive behavioral therapy was helpful to an extent. I had been trained in cognitive behavioral therapy. And so one weekend I used David Byrne's book, and I sequestered myself. My son would still nap at that time. And I went through the workbook and did it all. And I was I'm going to drive on the freeway. I hadn't driven on the freeway for a year, and I was able to drive on the freeway. And later I would always still push myself. So I drove kind of 2.5 hours with my kids alone. And then there was an opportunity to drive to San Francisco, which was 7 hours from LA. And I was I'm going to do it. And I would do these things scared, and I would white knuckle it. And, I did a lot of tapping and would go through my cognitive behavioral stuff and my cognitive distortions and my black and white thinking. And I think I was on CBT forums, and people were supportive, but it was always a lot of work. And I would sing and eat my sour candies. And I was still just it would work and then it wouldn't. And it was a lot of work. And then I'd fall back into still panicking and still experiencing anxiety. And I didn't realize that I was innocently overcomplicating it. But I also just felt so bad, because I was I'm doing the CBT. I've done neurofeedback. I did somatic therapy. And then I would fall in love with everything I'm doing, because I would read so much about it. And I would be now I need to train in somatic therapy. And I would, I did weekend long things training in Vedic meditation, but then months of stuff of training in meditation. And I would be why isn't it working for me? And I'm in Los Angeles, so there's a lot of meditation studios and breathwork studios, and I would do breathwork, like breathwork classes, and then I would hyper focus on my breathing, and I'd be like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Like, why isn't all this good stuff working? Now I've met so many people who it also didn't work for, but I never did until then. I never met one person who was as anxious as me. And then I felt like this secretly, like seriously broken person, because I was like, not only do I have driving anxiety, feel like I'm losing my mind, I'm trying all the things, and I'm not just trying, because we don't just try it. It's not like I tried it once. I did not. I did it for years. So I came into work one day, put it into Google, like, anxiety relief, panic attack relief, and up pops Sari Taylor, and she had a sort of like 5 or 7 day anxiety and panic program, and she'd send you a simple video, like a 30-minute video you just watched one a day, and it started to change my life. It was like exactly what I needed to hear. And one really big thing, a really big takeaway was that let me try to share. I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm doing too much. But I didn't hear it with judgment. It was just like, all of that, so much of what I was doing was unnecessary. And actually probably so much of what I was doing was the thing that was causing me to panic. Like, I saw it, and it was really welcome because it was a lot, so that was one thing. I just kind of got curious about doing less, like less strict nighttime routine and morning routine. Because I realized my wisdom got me through every panic attack also. I had such shame around my panic attacks. I would panic and, have to pull my car over so many times and have my ex-husband come and get me. We were married at the time. And then my parents bring me back to the car. Like, I just had a lot of shame for my panic attacks. And coming into the 3 principles understanding, I saw that my wisdom got me through that first panic attack. I had no idea what was going on. I felt like I was losing my mind, and somehow I pulled off the freeway and I found a place to park, and I called my mom and I called my psychiatrist, and I saw all my panic attacks in a new light. I was like, I got through them. So if I got through them, maybe I don't need to obsess about what I'll do if one happens, because that's what I would do. I would panic attacks for front page news. They were so much of what I thought about. It was like, what am I going to do if I have a panic attack? Is one coming? So that was a huge insight, that my wisdom got me through every panic attack, that there was less for me to do, that human beings are designed to return to balance. And a big thing was Sari was the first person who seemed to have anxiety and panic as bad as me. She also went to a mental hospital, which was my worst fear, because I thought, if I go to a mental hospital, could I still be a school psychologist? Could I still be a mom? And Sari did. So it kind of was like, it took some of that fear away. So there was a lot of big changes. I also had a lot of insights around thought, that thought always comes and goes. We didn't need to do anything to have new thought. And it was like revolutionary, because I used to do like tapping, and I thought I had to pull over and do like legs up the wall and finger holds and like shake it out and write down what I was saying and rip it up and look at my cognitive distortions. And I was like, oh no, thought just comes and goes, and that we're always feeling our thinking. We're not feeling our reality. Because for me, I would be on guard, and if I had the thought, like, I would get this weird feeling in my arm, and it would be like, are you having a panic attack? Is it coming? And I'd be like, So pretty early on, I saw some changes. I saw significantly less driving anxiety. I don't know if after coming into the 3 principles that I ever had a panic attack while driving again. So I believe it was 2018 that I came into the 3 principles understanding. And I really started to drive to work with a lot more ease. I had a lot less panic attacks. I can't remember having too many. I'm going to tell you about the ones that I did have. But just that alone. But I do remember, I think, looking into Sid Banks and being like, I literally felt like he wasn't speaking English. That's where the level of consciousness was for me. I was like, what's he talking about? I don't know. And so I was very into Sari Taylor. I could relate to her, Nicola Bird. And then I read Jack Pransky's book. But I didn't have a deep knowing. But it still was enough to really like take me from like depths of, extreme fear. I think it took away my fear of insanity, took away a lot of my physical symptoms, a lot of my driving anxiety. But I was still so used to like doing so much that I kind of got bored a little bit. or I just thought like, maybe this is too simple. And so I don't know, somewhere along the way, also I had no idea about all the podcasts that I know about now or all the people, but I started listening to like Kara Lowenthal about thought work, or like, it's like Unfuck Your Brain, I think. And then I got into thought work, and I was like, thought work, cool. And I think that was a bit of a detour, because what I later realized was like, oh my God, this just overcomplicates it to me. And I had already read this book called Back in Control, about the link between like pain and anger and anxiety. And I'd been planning on going to the Hoffman retreat, the Hoffman Institute, like the next April. So like 11 months. I think I'd already planned it. I can't really remember. So I had some like detours from the principles. Like it started to change my life. So then I went to the Hoffman process, which was like a week-long thing, and you had to do a lot of homework before. And I like love all that stuff. And so I was like super into that. And then I came out and I still went to like the Hoffman graduate stuff, but it was still, I realized like, oh, this is also unnecessary. And I'm not knocking it, like if you love any of that, but it was like something kept bringing me back to the simplicity of the 3 principles, that for me, it was like everything else was unnecessary and overcomplicating it. But I think I needed to see that for myself, like, oh, the principles are it. And the principles are happening whether we know about them or not. But just like this simplicity of understanding the human experience, like I just was like, oh my gosh. And so then actually after Hoffman, within a month, I got separated and I started dating. And I don't know if I'd had any panic attacks really, in that year. And then I met my boyfriend in August. And then I think it was September 2019. A lot had been going on. I think it must have been September. And I came to work and I started to feel like I could panic. And I resisted it. It's like I forgot what I knew. I resisted the panic attack. I was like, I do not want this to come. And I called my friend who was a clinical psychologist. She was like a few offices down. I was at work and she was like, okay, maybe try your techniques. And I was like, okay. And then I just had it. And then I started almost panicking. And I was like, I got to go home. And so I think I told her, I'm like, I think I'm having a panic attack. And I went to her office and I started making plans to like, I'm going to have my ex-husband, we were separated, but we still lived together. It was very early. And so I called him and I decided to go home. And the minute I called him, it was like my panic attack ended. So it wasn't a panic attack like I had experienced before, but I needed to have that one where I was like, oh, I just had this feeling that's the last panic attack I'm going to have. I saw that all it was that I resisted my experience and I started trying to use techniques. I started trying to ground myself again and like name 5 things. And I was like, again, I think that was kind of my third proof of the simplicity of what I understood. And so actually I'd already kind of put the wheels in motion. And so my ex-husband did pick me up. And I was driving home and it actually felt bittersweet. I was like, that's the last panic attack I'm going to have. And so after that, it was really just like, I knew it. And that was, I think September 2019. And I just, still like listened to stuff about the principles. And it wasn't really until I don't know when it exactly was. It was sometime during the pandemic. I always was like, kind of at some point there, I was like, I want everybody to know this. Why doesn't everybody know it? And I would share it with my students. I became certified like through the SPARK curriculum, which is an evidence-based curriculum, sharing the 3 principles in schools. And I would incorporate it a little bit. But I was like, I want other adults to know this. Like, I don't want anybody to suffer as long as I did with anxiety. But I thought it needed to be in person because every single thing I did was in person. And it was like, well, that was hard. I was the lead school psychologist in my district at the time. And it was like, then the pandemic happened and so many people were online. And I was like, I think I could do like a virtual group. So I started getting that ready. And that was when my understanding just really, really deepened. And so I had my first coaching group in September 2020. And I also did feel a little bit insecure because I was like, who am I? I'm just a school psychologist. Like, I think I should get my PhD. And I was like researching PhD programs, and I realized like I just want a PhD in the principles. So I started doing a year-long mentorship with Dr. Bill Pettit. And Dr. Pettit was like, have you read all of Sid's books? And I was like, I have not. I'd maybe read one. And I definitely heard Sid more. Like, I was able to understand him more during that time. But with Dr. Pettit, I read all of Sid's books twice through. I listened to all of his videos or almost all of his lectures multiple times. And he really encouraged me also to share Sid's work with my clients. And it was really through a lot of my work with Dr. Pettit and listening to Sid and reading Sid's books that my understanding deepened so much more to like a deep, deep knowing. And I also, I just kept having lessons. I kept learning lessons. I got a little bit obsessed with the principles when I started coaching. When it really changed my life, it was kind of light. I wasn't obsessed with it. But then when I started coaching, I was like, I want to be the best coach ever. And I kind of quickly got burned out. And Sari Taylor was also my amazing mentor. And I called her one time when I was feeling a bit burnt out, like early on. She was like, how are you reading books? Like, are you highlighting? And I was like, I would obsessively like watch YouTube videos on the 3 principles and listen to podcasts and read books of like, how can I help my clients the best? And that was really a lesson that, even doing that, like too much of a good thing. And I would hear it loud and clear of like when I'd be driving, sometimes I'd get that anxious wake up call and it would be like, enough 3 principles. So because of my wobbles, my understanding kept deepening. I really stopped experiencing derealization very early on. So I definitely had like a year or two of never experiencing it. And then when I got a bit obsessed with trying to be the best coach, I would have a little wake up call of derealization. And I remember kind of feeling like I'm immune, like I don't fear it, so just don't come to me again. And some of my early coaching experiences were really helpful. I was still a school psychologist, so my groups I would run at 5 p.m. And my groups really took off. So I'd be a school psychologist, and then I would run groups Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There was a time when I was doing that. And I would also do consultations, and I worked with people all over the world. So I'd sometimes do a consultation at 5 p.m. and then at 9 p.m. There was one day in there, it was like probably after a Thursday, and I had a pretty intense group. It was great, but it was still, I was still kind of in my head a lot about coaching sometimes. And then my kids and I were watching Harry Potter, and it felt very assaultive. Like, I think my nervous system felt really like, oh. And then I was brushing my son's teeth, and I just felt this fearful, and then it occurred to me, I had a thought, I could have a panic attack. And I was like, oh. And I didn't know that signal. And the minute I had that thought I could have a panic attack, it fell away. I didn't have a panic attack because I didn't fear panic attacks anymore. I'm like, oh my God, I saw it. And I realized that I got caught up. So my experience getting caught up in the early days of coaching was really, really helpful, really helped deepen my understanding. And then also I became a registered 3 principles practitioner with the 3 principles global community. I did a 2-year apprenticeship there. And, they're very much like purists when it comes to the 3 principles understanding based on the teachings of Sid. So for my 2 years that I was an apprentice, I at least once a week, but sometimes multiple times a week, I would go to, 3 principles things that the global community offered. I watched all of their kind of training videos. We did a lot of supervision calls. And so my understanding continued to deepen. And then I would just find people that I wanted to be my mentors, like George and Linda Pransky, Hannah Studley, and then just having my own coaches. And I keep having insight. So yeah, early on it was about anxiety and panic, and then also being in a new relationship. This is only my second longest relationship. Sometimes I would have a relationship anxiety or OCD and get an ick and need to end it. My husband and I were together for 17 years, from 20 to 37. But anytime I date somebody, I'd never dated anybody longer than 3 months. And so when the 3 months was coming with my boyfriend, I was like, And we've been together almost 4.5 years. But actually, I had a lot of insights. And I'm still, I think, getting better at being in a relationship. I've had insights about judgment. So I think it was a series of insights after another that gradually changed my life. Something I didn't bring up was sometime along in there, very early on, my health anxiety completely fell away. And so that was something that I didn't know was possible. I didn't even think I had health anxiety. But I did. I had severe health anxiety or OCD. I had orthorexia, but I never even went to address it. I was addressing driving anxiety and panic attacks, but like my relationship with food and my body went to the next level. I had done so much work around healing from orthorexia and body image stuff and intuitive eating, and some stuff would work, but like just coming into the principles understanding, like truly intuitive eating, truly body love, just overnight. And one final thing, I guess, about driving. My freedom from driving anxiety was also gradual. Like I stopped having panic attacks, but I still didn't love driving for years. And I'm not saying that that's going to be your experience, because I know that driving anxiety, I still had a lot of thinking, that's what I came in for. And it was so I've been in the 3 principles conversation for almost 6 years now. And I did, as I said, there were some big changes early on, but my level of understanding is not at all as deep as it is now. And I know it can go deeper. That's the great thing. There's never an end point. I'm still always having insights. But it was 2 years ago, I think, I was doing a week-long thing with Michael Neal. So every day from 8 to 9, we'd have something, and I was listening. But no, we never talked about anxiety. I don't think I talked much. I just listened. And then it was Saturday, and I was driving to see my friend Keely, and she lives about 45 minutes or an hour away from me. And I was getting on the freeway, and I'm like, something feels different. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about driving. I never thought about this drive. And I didn't realize until then, if I had a longer drive, I would think about it. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, it felt like this last 3% of the driving anxiety fell away. And I was so excited. I'm like, I hope it's dark. I hope it's dark. I just want to drive home in the dark. And I did. And then I was like, I want an opportunity for me to do a long drive by myself. I'm so excited. And then I came home, and as I think the universe sometimes happens, I was going through an email that I don't use, and one of my good friends was turning 40, that next weekend in Ojai. And I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm driving by myself, 2 hours to Ojai, and I did it. I drove, and I was like, just complete freedom and ease. And it was funny. I just was dumb and ran over this thing and ended up twisting my ankle in these high boots that night. And so I came home, my ankle was so swollen. And so the next morning I just was like, I got to get out of here and drive home. Luckily it was my left ankle, so I could drive home. So I drove home, no breakfast, just got a Diet Coke and a bag of chips, and drove home again, with a giant twisted ankle. And I was like, look at me, freedom. So that was something also that was gradual. One other thing to bring up. So one of my other symptoms was I would hold my breath and then focus on my breathing and just have dysregulated breathing that sometimes would last for 3 weeks at a time, and my chest would ache and I would have this bad feeling in my head. So that was something that would happen on and off, honestly, for the first year that I was in the 3 principles understanding. And I think it was that I would look to see, is my breathing thing here? I would scan for it. And it was definitely less, but I still would go to breathwork classes, I think, and sometimes I did this kettlebell routine because I wanted to make myself breathless, because then I thought I could shake myself out of it. So I would still do 40 to 50 kettlebell swings. But then I would look in the afternoon, is my breathing here? And it would be there. And it wasn't until, honestly, the summer of 2019, and I was listening to a podcast with Nicola Bird and John L. Macadam about health anxiety symptoms. And John was talking about how when we scan, they show up. And it was I saw myself, but I saw myself without judgment. And I just saw it. And I didn't do anything, but I had an insight. And insights changes from the inside out. So as I said, some of my changes were gradual, but some of my insights were overnight. Or I saw that and I stopped scanning, so I have no idea when my breathing thing what fell away. But it did fall away. And then it's not I've never held my breath, but honestly, since then, that was, 4 years ago. And I noticed in many, a couple, a year later, once I held my breath, and I saw it as a love letter, a tap on the shoulder, that I was taking my experience seriously. And I was like, oh. And so that's it about my insights that gradually changed my life. And I continue to have insights. That's why I get so excited to stay in this conversation. One thing I know that's unfolding for me is how to have a business without thinking about it. I think my intellect is more involved than it needs to be about my business and about coaching too. But what I know now is I'm much more patient. I think of myself kind of actually as a slow learner, and I'm okay with it because my life continues to get better. I continue to spend more time in my life than in my thoughts, but I'm not completely present at all. Like, I'm still in my head, but I'm still incredibly more peaceful, incredibly more happier, calmer, trusting, empowered than I was as a child, and definitely than I was in my 20s or 30s. And so I hope this was helpful for you. Lots of love to you all.